Before Columbus ever set foot in America, before a single European map existed, someone built a city here bigger than London. Not log cabins, not small villages, a city with pyramids taller than some in Egypt, plazas the size of football fields, and a population that outnumbered Paris at the time. And almost nobody in America today has heard its name. It's called Cahokia, and what happened to it is one of the strangest disappearing acts in human history. Let's go back about 1,000 years. Right across the river from where the city of St. Louis, Missouri stands today, there was a civilization so advanced that when French explorers first stumbled onto its ruins in the 1600s, they refused to believe Native Americans had built it. They assumed it had to be Vikings, or a lost tribe of Israel, or literally anyone else, because the truth was too hard to accept, that indigenous Americans had built one of the largest cities on Earth centuries before Europeans arrived, and then it had vanished so completely that its own name was lost to time. We call the people Mississippians today because we don't actually know what they called themselves. Their writing, if they had any, hasn't survived. What has survived is dirt, literally millions of tons of it, hand-carried basket by basket, and piled into more than 120 massive earthen mounds. The largest one is called Monk's Mound. It covers more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's taller than a 10-story building, and it was built entirely by hand, without wheels, without draft animals, one basket of soil at a time. Archaeologists estimate it took over 14 million baskets of earth to build just that one structure. Think about that for a second. 14 million trips, each one carrying maybe 50 pounds of dirt up a hill in the heat for generations. No machines, no metal tools, just human labor and an enormous amount of organization. Now here's where it gets strange. When researchers started digging into Cahokia in the 20th century, they found something they didn't expect. Evidence of city planning. Streets laid out on a grid. Plazas positioned to align with the sun during the solstices. Neighborhoods for different social classes. This wasn't a random settlement. This was a designed metropolis, engineered with the same level of intention as Rome or Teotihuacan. At its peak, around the year 1100, Cahokia had somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 residents. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the same size as London at the exact same time in history. It was, for a while, the largest city north of Mexico, bigger than anything else on the entire continent, bigger than it would be again until Philadelphia surpassed its population in the 1780s. That's not a typo. For nearly 700 years after Cahokia's peak, no city in what's now the United States held more people. Archaeologists have also found something that changes the whole picture of who these people actually were. A massive wooden monument nicknamed Woodhenge. It was a circle of enormous cedar posts, functioning almost exactly like Stonehenge, marking sunrise positions for the solstices and equinoxes. Whoever built Cahokia wasn't just stacking dirt. They were tracking the sky, calculating the calendar, and building their entire city around astronomical precision. And then, it emptied out. By the year 1350, Cahokia was abandoned. Completely. The mounds were left standing, the plazas went silent, and within a couple hundred years, forests had swallowed the ruins. When French settlers arrived, all they found were grass-covered hills that looked almost natural. Nobody imagined a city had once stood there. So what actually happened? This is where archaeologists still argue, and there isn't one single accepted answer. One theory points to the environment. Cahokia needed enormous amounts of wood for construction and firewood. Some estimates say residents cut down over 20,000 acres of forest just to maintain the city. Without trees, rain would have caused massive erosion and flooding, wrecking the farmland the city depended on. Researchers have actually found layers of sediment in nearby creek beds that match this exact kind of flooding event, dated to right around the time the population started shrinking. Another theory points to climate. Around the same period Cahokia collapsed, tree ring data from the region shows a series of brutal droughts hit the central United States. If Cahokia's crops failed repeatedly, and this was a city that needed to feed nearly 20,000 people every single day, a famine could have triggered exactly the kind of slow exodus the evidence shows. People didn't vanish overnight. They appear to have left gradually, family by family, over the course of a century. A third theory is even darker: social collapse. Some archaeologists have found evidence of fortification walls being built late in the city's life. Tall wooden palisades with watchtowers, something you don't build unless you're afraid of an attack. Combined with signs of internal conflict, it's possible that as resources dried up, the tightly organized society that built those mounds simply tore itself apart from the inside. But here's the part that really gets people. Excavations at one of Cahokia's mounds, known as Mound 72, uncovered something researchers did not expect to find in North America: a mass burial. One man laid on a bed made of nearly 20,000 shell beads, arranged in the shape of a falcon, surrounded by the remains of dozens of other people. Some of them appear to have been sacrificed, including a group of young women buried together in a single event. It's one of the clearest pieces of evidence that Mississippian society had a rigid, almost brutal hierarchy, with a ruling elite powerful enough to command human sacrifice on a massive scale, similar in structure to what we associate with Central American civilizations far to the south. And Cahokia wasn't an isolated event. Similar mound-building cultures stretched from Louisiana all the way up to Wisconsin, and from Oklahoma to Georgia, an entire network of related societies spanning hundreds of years and thousands of miles. Take Serpent Mound in Ohio. It's an earthwork shaped like an enormous snake, nearly a quarter-mile long, its body coiling across a ridge in 7 distinct curves before ending in a tightly wound spiral tail. Nobody knows exactly who built it or precisely when. Estimates have ranged from over 2,000 years ago to just 900 years ago, and the debate still isn't settled. What we do know is that its head aligns almost perfectly with the sunset on the summer solstice. That's not a coincidence anyone can easily explain away. Then there's Poverty Point in Louisiana, a set of concentric C-shaped ridges built nearly 3,400 years ago, making it older than the founding of Rome. It required an estimated 238,000 cubic meters of soil, all moved by hand, by a society that, as far as we can tell, hadn't even adopted farming yet. That last detail alone breaks a lot of assumptions, because for decades, archaeologists believed large-scale monument building only happened after a culture developed agriculture. Poverty Point suggests hunter-gatherers organized well enough to build something on this scale, centuries before anyone in the region planted a single crop. Further north, in Wisconsin, you'll find effigy mounds, earthworks shaped like bears, birds, and even a mound shaped like a giant lizard-like creature, nearly 200 feet long. Their exact religious or ceremonial purpose is still debated, but their sheer variety tells us these weren't just burial sites. They were symbols, statements, something meant to be seen from above, in a landscape without airplanes, without any way to view the full shape from ground level. For a long time, American textbooks barely mentioned any of this. The idea that pre-Columbian America had cities, planned architecture, astronomical monuments, and social structures rivaling anything in Europe just didn't fit the narrative most people grew up with. It was easier to imagine North America as empty wilderness before 1492, a blank map waiting to be filled in. It wasn't blank. Cahokia proves it. A city with more people than London, pyramids bigger than some in Egypt, wooden observatories tracking the sun with precision, and a mystery about its ending that, 1,000 years later, we still haven't fully solved. There's one more detail that tends to stop people in their tracks. When Cahokia was thriving, the people there were building a skyline visible for miles across the flat Mississippi floodplain. Dozens of mounds, plazas, wooden palisades, smoke from thousands of fires. And within a few generations after its collapse, when Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto marched through the region in the 1540s, barely 200 years later, he found scattered villages with no memory of the city that once stood there. The collapse wasn't just physical. It was a total collapse of cultural memory. An entire civilization's story, erased almost completely, in less time than separates us today from the founding of the United States. Today you can actually visit the site. It's called Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, just outside St. Louis, and it's recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of only a small handful in the entire United States. Monk's Mound still stands there, silent, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas, rising above cornfields and highways, a survivor from a city that once rivaled London in size and organization. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not just why Cahokia fell, but why so few people even know it existed at all. An entire lost world, buried in plain sight, right in the middle of America, waiting for someone to ask the right question.